Welcome back to the podcast. A special guest today, Gene Smith, Athletic Director of Ohio State. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and not the Athletic Director for that much longer. You've announced your retirement, Gene. Why was this the right time for you? Was it a hard decision, or did you know, like, okay, time for me to move on to something else?
Yeah, it was a challenging decision. It was a hard decision because it's a kind of a process that you go through. And, I've always had people tell me, people I respect, that you're just going to know when it's time. It's going to be one of those moments. And in this summer, I actually was in Arizona with my wife, Sheila. I was going through my process to think about goals for the year. And I remember telling her, you know what, I feel like it's time. And we've talked about it periodically, but I just felt like it was time, and it just kind of came over me. It was kind of a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It wasn't any particular issue or anything of that nature. It was just time. And I think I was 48 or 49 when I came here. I forgot. And I'm 67 now, so it's been a good run. And I'm ready.
And if we follow your Twitter account, we see you update us on the 7 grandkids from time to time. So now you can just be a full-time grandpa. That's good.
Exactly it. I want to spend quality time with my children and my grandchildren. And it's been kind of in and out, So now I'll have a chance to be with them, go to their school. And one of my grandkids broke his foot this weekend. I wish I could have been there, and drive him to the hospital and all that kind of stuff. And so I want to have that opportunity.
You and I have talked about this idea, I think, a lot over the years, using the power and influence of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like, as we've seen so much change in college athletics and so much change in the Big Ten, how do you feel like Ohio State has wielded its influence through you, through the presidents at various times? And how much has Ohio State, do you think, helped shape where we are right now with an 18-team Big Ten, with the 12-team college football playoff on the horizon? Yeah. Has Ohio State had a big say in that in your mind?
Yeah, it's sure, no question about that. But we've always operated understanding that we're part of a league, and that everyone in the room brings different thoughts and ideas and historical knowledge to the table or whatever. So we've really not kind of had to wield power, so to speak, like the Ohio State power. Just a couple of times, during COVID, obviously, during that time frame. But normally it's more of a collaboration. It's more bringing everyone else along. My opportunities were there because of my experience in Ohio State. I've seen it all. And so a lot of times in the room, I can revert back to experiences that I had that may relate to the issue that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so that has helped us guide a conversation, not just because of, a lot of times it is because we're in Ohio State, but also it's because of our experiences. And so it's been enjoyable. It really has. We've never, during COVID, we had to kind of wield our power a little bit to get back to play, but that was about it.
That you think that of all the times, and you're almost 2 decades here, that's the one that stands out the most. You think if you in Ohio State and the president and Ryan Day and everyone involved, the parents at Ohio State, had not said, we got to play.
Right.
Do you think maybe the Big Ten would not have changed its mind?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the end of the day, we wielded a lot of power and influence in that space. Some with my colleagues, just bringing them along, saying, okay, we got to get here, we got to get there. And so, that point in time, I and we made a collective decision that we were going to wield our power and be strong in this initiative. And there were a couple phone calls, and a couple actions. I remember Bill Moose at Nebraska, threatened to play his games. I forgot exactly how he put it, non-conference games. And he was actually lighting schools up. And I'm like, that's curious. So I didn't know the details of the contract and if we could actually do that. So, I wanted to make sure that if he was going to do it, that we all could do it. And so I was, I don't want to display my passion and attitude on those Zoom calls to find out contractually if we could actually make that happen. But the threat that we were going to do that was big enough the threat that we had, that I wanted my lawyers in the room to evaluate whether or not that could be done, was big enough. And so that was a time when I made a decision, we're going to bring it all to bear.
Okay, because you've always said, right, a rising tide lifts all ships.
That's right, and I believe that.
What do you believe has been the right balance of trying to do what's best for Ohio State, because obviously that's your first priority, but also doing what's best for the Big Ten? Has that been a difficult balance to strike in your mind, or is it often the same thing?
So it's not really. Yeah, that's a good point. It's really been the same thing.
Okay.
You know, we're in an example right now where we're playing, Michigan State at night at home on the second Saturday in November. Historically, that was one of the tolerances that we'll never do that. But because of how the television arrangement occurred, we needed to help. And so I made a sacrifice and said, okay, we're going to go ahead and play that game regardless of our current restrictions and our tolerances to help the league.
Okay.
To help the league. That now, who knows what the weather's going to be like, right? But at the end of the day, that was a sacrifice on our part. I don't like playing night games that late in the year for our fans. But for the betterment of the league, we needed to help. And then there's been times over my career when it's been like that. I wouldn't say that that's a big lift for us, but, it's a sacrifice.
When you look at what some of the blue bloods, some of the anchor programs in college football, what's happening right now? You have Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
Texas started its own network, and I think that started us down the path. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
You were part of that. Oklahoma and Texas, they're leaving the Big 12. The Big 12 has to reshape itself. USC and UCLA leave the Pac-12. It basically leads to the demise of the Pac-12. You have Florida State in the ACC rattling, hey, we're trying to get out of here. Meanwhile, Ohio State as an anchor program in the Big Ten, the Big Ten did not break up. The Big Ten has added. Other programs have wanted to join the Big Ten. There's a power that's coalescing in the Big Ten. Did it have to be this way? I always like to think of what ifs, right? The Pac-12 broke up. What if Ohio State or other schools here would have played it differently? Could we be in a world where it's the Big Ten that has been split up and is going different places? Was there enough power in Midwestern football that it was always going to play out this way? Or is it because you guys played nicely together and created an environment for the Big Ten to stay together?
You just said it. It's because our collective values and principles and how our respect for tradition and history and our footprint kept us together. We're in a very good footprint. And so when you think about the population, when you think about the size of our schools, when you think about our alumni bases, we're some of the oldest schools in the country. And so that's why our reach is so deep. It's just we're probably more collegial in some respects. And so I always felt the Big Ten would stay strong and be together. When you have us, when you have the team up north, when you have a Penn State, when you have a Wisconsin, at the end of the day, and bringing in Nebraska was very helpful. So I think that the reality is the Big Ten is a solid and has always been a solid conference. And I could never imagine that it would get to a point where it would break up.
Okay.
TV is so strong. Big Ten Network.
Yep.
I mean, think about it. I mean, after Texas started their own network, we started BTN, and the pain that we went through to start that thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's been wildly successful. And the fact that we hooked up with Fox when everybody else was ESPN, ABC, we took a risk with Fox and created really a competition in the marketplace for TV. Big Ten did that. And so I think it's a conference that was always stable, going to stay stable, never break up.
Maybe we're a little surprised by the timing, but I don't know that you're not surprised what happened with Oregon and Washington eventually getting here, right? No,
not shocked at all.
It feels like to me that college football is dividing itself, right? It's been a regional sport, and I think it's going to be two regions now. It's going to be North and South.
Could be.
And that I think it has a chance to be really fun, be distinctive, right? ESPN's with the SEC now, and if Florida State or other schools go to the SEC, we see the Big Ten. Maybe the Big Ten even grows there with Fox. Do you think maybe that's what we're getting to? And if we did Could that be cool?
Exactly. You said it earlier. Fun, cool, exciting. I mean, I look forward to the total integration of USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington. I think there's going to be fun contests. I think the first time, the Buckeyes have traveled to Washington before, but when they travel to Oregon and it becomes kind of a competitive mix over time, I think that's going to be exciting. It's new. It's different. There's a novelty to it. And so, I don't know. I just think that I kind of look at it from, the point of view that from a business point of view, when we go to negotiate, sure, it's going to make us stronger, but it's also going to create some new traditions. And I'm excited about that.
When you think about the population bases, the big markets, right, that are going to be part of the Big Ten now, often when you end up comparing like the Big Ten and the SEC, for instance, one of the things you go to right away is you look at all the national titles in football and men's basketball in the SEC. And the Big Ten, just in recent times, doesn't compare to that. Is there a way that the new Big Ten, the growing Big Ten, can leverage the markets, the power of that, the money of that, to maybe even raise the level of competition? There's a part of me, it's like you get the gang together, and now let's go head to head with the South. Like we're going to build up where we can. You can't move Columbus to where all the football players are in Florida, right? But you can leverage what you do best. Is there a chance for the Big Ten to maybe leverage its own strengths in a way that wins more national championships for the Big Ten?
I don't know that. I mean, that just depends on the individual institutions and their recruiting strength. I mean, sure, you have to look at it from a conference point of view, but realistically, who are the coaches? What institution is putting together the strategy to recruit the best and the brightest student athletes and develop them the right way? I mean, that's still it. There's a reason we are recruiting in the southeast part of the country heavily. It goes to your comment. There's a lot of players down there. Before it used to be, I forgot what year it was, years ago, we were like focused on California and Texas. Right. And that shifted over time. So now we're a little bit more, we're still out there, but we're a lot more focused on the Southeast. So I don't know. I think it's certainly the league helps, those type of games will help. But I think this really gets down to, we just got to recruit better across the board. And, I'm excited about Matt Rule in Nebraska. I think he's an outstanding recruiter. Luke at Wisconsin. At the end of the day, remember when Urban challenged the league to improve its recruiting?
Yeah, the more gentlemen's agreements.
Exactly right. And so I really think we got to stay focused on that. This is about players. I mean, and developing players. And so the Southeastern Conference schools have done a better job than that in some ways. And so we got to stay on this trajectory. Do I think this new model is going to help a coach? No question. But we at the end of the day, we got to do a better job in recruiting across the board.
You mentioned this at your news conference. Like you've always thought it'd be nice to have a college football czar, right? Someone who's in charge of that. I don't think anybody could argue that there's a leadership vacuum in college sports. The NCAA is basically shed that responsibility. Didn't have a president for a while, has a president now. Do TV networks run college sports right now?
Oh yeah, they have a lot of say in it. It's no
Is
question.
That good? Is that okay?
Well, let's be clear. They don't run college sports, because they have influence because of their money and their product, which is TV, but they don't run it. I mean, at the end of the day, we make a lot of local and national decisions legislatively and things of that nature. They didn't create the transfer portal. They didn't create NIL. So they don't run college sports. So I don't know if that's the right word, but they do have significant influence when it comes to the shaping of, the conferences and the strength of the individual schools and conferences, because they pump a lot of money into those conferences and schools. But as far as running it, not really. I mean, they don't have anything to do with, whether or not we're going to have a kickoff team. That's the rules committee. So, I think when people say they run college sports, I think they need to use a different way to position that. Yeah. They have significant influence on the structure, overall structure. So, they got influence and they have a say in, which teams are going to line up in what conferences. Yeah. And that's really about it.
I can remember asking you this question, I think, when the Big Ten Network was starting, when Nebraska was coming in. It's like, what are you going to do with the money? Right?
Yeah,
hey,
right,
everyone in the Big Ten is going to make more money. So, like, okay, like, well, money's only good if you can use it for something. I do think you could look at what the Big Ten has done with some of its head coaching hires.
Yeah.
And I think in lots of major sports, and I think the staffs of those schools, you know, Brett Bielema once upon a time left Wisconsin for Arkansas because he felt like they couldn't pay assistants. It doesn't feel like that's the case with the Big Ten right now. There's going to be, more influx of money. You guys are in a great spot from the TV thing. Like, what are you doing with the money? Do you have enough? Like, can you ever have enough money? Are you always, or are there times when it's like, well, maybe we'd make more money doing this, but actually we don't need more money. Let's take another thing into consideration. You know what I mean? Or is it a business? It's always a business.
It's always a business, Doug, you know, and every place is different. So we have 36 sports.
Yeah. Right.
And Michigan has 31. I think Penn State has 29. It might be reversed. I forgot. But if you look at, let's use the Southeastern Conference. I mean, their average is around 22, 23 sports. So, you know, they're going to end every year with a net off of their revenue every single year, unless they're mismanaging. They're going to end every single year with a net. For us, we got the expenses of everything, including Brutus. You know, the cheer team, the dance team, you know, all those are expenditures, and our average expenditures go up every single year, 5 to 7%. And we pay for our tuition and in-state, out-of-state, or international, and that goes up anytime the university raises tuition. But also, we've made a philosophical decision. We're going to recruit character, and we're going to put everything around those student athletes to be the best that they can be. And you see it. You walk to Woody Hayes, and you see more equipment than you can imagine. You know, you saw Marvin Harrison catching passes on Twitter. We'll offer that machine as a computer-generated machine, and you know that costs money.
Right.
So so our sports sciences, our support around our athletes, that costs money, and all those people every year cost you a little bit more money, and so you know it's an expensive venture to do it the way we're doing it, to make sure we're investing everything that a student athlete deserves and being the best she or he can be. So that's expensive. So where would that money go? It'll go into that. Now, we also have a model where we oversee all of our facilities. You know, we're the custodians. We pay for deferred maintenance. You know, if the new tennis facility, if we don't put X amount of dollars into it every single year for deferred maintenance, 10 years from now, we're going to have a balloon payment on deferred maintenance. So, you know, our budget is complicated because most people don't understand. We run the golf courses, you know, and so that's the grounds of the golf course. So there's just that money goes in a lot of different places. We need it. There's going to be years where we'll have a net. There's going to be years where we have a deficit. Based upon, like this year, we're struggling. We're going to have 6 home games. There you go, perfect example. We had 8 home games last year, home run, phenomenal year. This year's going to be a struggle. We got to be very creative, manage our expenses, and generate revenue. Next year, well, it depends upon the schedule. I think we'll have 8 home games still because we got 3 non-conference.
But that won't be your problem.
Yeah, right. Shouldn't be. But anyway, so where does the money go? It goes there to support our student athletes. And so we, you know, hopefully one day there's a little bit more money in there for cash to the pockets of the athletes. But right now, that's not in play.
I've always thought that the Ohio State lens to view college athletics is very interesting because I think is this a fair definition? You want to compete with Alabama in football and you want to compete with Stanford and everything else.
That's right.
You want to win the national championship in football. You also want to win the Director's Cup, right? Who else thinks that way? Is Ohio State alone in that? And why? Like, why does Ohio State think that way? Is that you? Did you feel like the university and the athletic department thought that way before you got here? Because that's 2 very different things and 2 very challenging things. But I think that's what you guys have laid out for the last 2 decades.
Yeah, no, that's who we are, and that's what we've always strived to be. And Andy Geiger had that too, my predecessor. So at the end of the day, if you're at the top of the pyramid, the team up north, they focus that way. Texas focuses that way. I mean, so you try and build your overall program to be the best that it could be and win that Director's Cup. Now everybody doesn't focus like we do and how you build that with like our circle of care, the things we've talked about. But there's a number of schools that focus just like we do, trying to win the national championship in football, but also trying to win the Director's Cup. There's not a lot, but there's a few.
So you do clearly care about the 1,000 athletes at Ohio State.
It means a lot to me. I mean, I got a text today from Mike Pacillo. Remember him, the wrestler?
Yeah.
Who came out and he texted me, and it's just so moving because he remembered that I was one of the first persons that reached out to him when he came out. And that, at the end of the day, is what it's all about. It's about that student-athlete experience, making sure you create an environment for them to be successful and feel comfortable in that environment. And that was a great example for me. That's the juice right there.
Yeah. In that vein, what can be done, what should be done to ease the life of all the Ohio State athletes who are now going to have 4 West Coast schools in their conference?
Right.
And are there things that can be done with money, with charter flights, with, I don't know, nicer hotels to stay in, with anything like that? And then a second part of that is
basketball team is in Brazil right now, by the way.
Oh, well, see, you got to save the Brazil money for Oregon now. That's pretty good. I've never been to Brazil.
Think about that, So.
Like how high on the list of priorities is that?
Huge.
Because this is a football decision that 4 West Coast schools are coming in, but you have 35 other sports. Or, the women's hockey teams, I guess, not going to go play USC.
Yeah, no.
But like a lot of other sports who are going to have to deal with the fallout of that.
Right.
Can you solve the problems with money?
Yeah, you can. So, but also strategic scheduling, but certainly money. A lot of our teams already play on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So this is not new. So some of our teams, for RPI reasons, have to go play the West Coast or the Texas area. So tennis, for example, in order to strengthen the RPI so that when we get to postseason, we're ranked high. He'll go and play Texas. He'll go and play UCLA. So they do fly around already. So, but from a conference point of view, looking at, I think if someone asked today if women's soccer or volleyball or men's soccer has to go out west to play UCLA, play them on a Friday night and then play the other school on a Sunday, then come home. So you got to mitigate missed class time. So you have to look at that carefully. But I think there's mechanics around that. But also I would agree with you that there has to be some financial investments for those students to travel. And some may be charter and some may just be great commercial opportunities. But certainly there's going to have to be some investments made for some sports at certain times for that travel.
And do you believe that is a priority of the Big Ten? To make sure that it's not too much. They're trying to go to class. They're trying to live a normal life. They're trying to get sleep so that their lives aren't completely thrown off by. And do you have to play everybody? I think the definition of a conference, we have to let go of what a conference used to be.
You have to.
Just because Washington and Ohio State are in the same men's soccer conference, do you actually have to play in the regular season? Could you maybe just see them in the conference tournament?
Sure. And do you have to play at their places? Why not pick a place in the middle of the country and you bring 4 teams in and you play?
Okay.
So there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but you're exactly right. It doesn't have to be round robin. So what's nice is our senior women administrators are really good in this space. And so all these ideas, they're processing, they're thinking through. And I believe we'll get there. Now, will there be some growing pains? Year 1 might not be 100% right. So you tweak it, and then year 2, you get it a little bit better. But to your earlier question, you got to keep the student athlete and their welfare as the focus. Okay. And we'll make some mistakes in the first year, and then you change it. Or they'll make some mistakes in the first year. They'll change it.
They'll change it. Couple football scheduling questions. Again, the logistics of this. You guys came up with a plan. It feels like now the plan has to change. There's a reader who sent this in to me. Jim sent this in, and it clarified for me. a Big Ten football schedule. You pair up everybody. So you create 9 pairs.
Okay.
And I think we could go through right now. You would know what the pairs are.
Yeah.
They're all apparent. You get Penn State, Michigan State. They're everybody else is obvious. So Ohio State, Michigan. Your opposite pair is your rival. You play them every year. Everything else, the other 8 pairs, you play one team in the pair every year. And you get a rotation. So you play everybody else twice every 4 years, one there, one here, right? So you get that cycle that you guys are interested in. Did we just solve the scheduling problem for the Big Ten?
You're not going to get paid for that idea.
I know, it's okay.
Sorry, Jim. It's not a consulting moment.
Student athletes just like you. Smooth and easy, right?
You know, that's interesting thought. You know, I'm sure we have Kerry Kinney and Kevin Pogba in the league. We're working on what our scheduling model will be. I'm sure they're thinking through that.
But you can run it up the chain,
Yeah,
right?
I will. No question about it. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. Ryan Day says he's worried about playing Michigan back-to-back if you play at end of the regular season in the conference championship game. I say you still got to play it late in the year, but if you want to move it to game 11 instead of game 12 to eliminate that possibility, but you're still building to something, then in game 12, you just play somebody else.
Right.
I'd be open to that. You know, I think there were times when maybe Michigan ADs wanted to move the game, and I think maybe you threw your body in front of that and said, we're not moving the game. Could you see Ohio State, Michigan maybe being played in November, but not the last game of the regular season ever?
Right. You know, I don't know. I really don't know. Right now it's contractual. So that's not going to happen.
It's contractual with this TV
television
agreement.
That's right.
So it's at least 7 years off.
Well, I think
it's
there's 5 years.
5, okay.
Yeah. So 5 years, then you can change it. But right now, but you know, I think, you know, and even if something's contractual, it's about the partnership. So if you use your sample, if you did move it, and you wanted to move it, even though it's contractual, how do you, if we think that that's beneficial, how do you make sure you move it and you work with your partner and you modify the contract, you amend the contract? So that's first. There's a way to do that. But the question becomes, you know, are you comfortable playing back to back?
Ryan's not.
What's the realistic chance that might happen?
Right.
I mean, remember, we went through this with legends and leaders.
We did.
Right. We can go back to that, by the way.
Let's not do that.
So, you know, I just don't know. You know, if we move that game and just for that reason, because it might not ever happen. And so, you know, it's a possibility, but, you know, now you got USC in the league, you got, you know, Oregon in the league, and, you know, I'm not so sure that's the right thing.
Maybe guaranteed.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when Ryan Day said that at Big Ten Media Days, or that's been a discussion?
No, I've vetted it, and, you know, that's fine for him to say that, and I think it's always got to be talked about. The team up north is against that idea right now, and Ward and I have talked about it, and they're against it right now. And but I think you got to keep it on the table.
Okay,
you have to, because it's in the league. It's so valuable. It is so valuable where it is for TV.
Okay,
for all the reasons you can imagine. The buildup is significant. All the other games that happened that weekend, the viewership has been ridiculous. So I think you can go back to TV and make some rationale around it, but you know, you have to really have some good metrics to say it would be even better if you did this. It's pretty valuable right now.
Yeah,
it is.
So I've been doing this since 2005 also, but I'm just writing stories and doing podcasts. You're running the show. One thing about Ohio State is always interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually good.
Right.
You guys are usually pretty good at this.
Right.
But even if you're not good, it is super interesting.
Always.
And there have been ups and downs here in your time. There, you mentioned winning a national championship in football, winning a national championship in wrestling. You guys have won championships in lots of different things, competed at a very high level. You've also had things where you've had to deal with the NCAA, all those kind of things. As you look back, right, is it every day just like nuts when you're the Ohio State athletic director? Like, what is it like? Because you're trying to be the best, basically in everything.
Right.
And also there are some things that pop up along the way. Like, what was it like to be running the show in this athletic department for almost 2 decades when you take in the totality of everything that's happened?
It's been fun. It's been fun. You know, I'm that guy, you know, I'm probably the idiot. So I believe this. If you run a large organization with so many people, and in our case it's 523, My job is to make sure I create an environment that is great collaborators, great communication, and highly positive. Highly positive. The worst place to make decisions for anyone is when you're upset, you're pissed off, you're mad, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom of the mood elevator. The best place to make decisions and be successful is when you're operating at the top of the mood elevator. You're happy and you're just feeling good about things. And so I'm that guy that even like everybody else, you wake up in the morning and one of those days you just don't feel like going to work. I'm in tune with myself. I know what I have to do from a trigger point of view to make myself feel better about the day. So I play my music in my car. I may roll my window down, start singing, whatever it is. By the time I get to work, I'm positive. If I walk in this environment and I'm negative, what's that going to do to my teammates? They're going to be negative. And so I try and elevate everybody to be the best that they can be by doing that myself. So my days, in a year, 97% or 8% of my days, that's who I am. That's just how I operate. And so to me, it's been fun. And frankly, as I'm going through a day, if something causes me to go in a downward spiral, I get out of that chair and I'll go over and see our student athletes. I mean, I just have all these little triggers. Sit down and talk to Cody McMahon, who's like, crazy as all get out, and just make you feel better about what you do. And so, I don't know, over my career, there's been some hardships, 2011 with that situation and, the Urban Meyer situation. And there's been some, the worst part, it's just funny, people forget about the hardest part. Holly, our synchronized swimming coach, texted me after my announcement and reminded me that the first time she met me was when we lost a student athlete. And that vision came back to me of, being in that apartment, where that student athlete had passed and Holly's there and the EMS is there and all that. And, those moments are like a nightmare, and so I've had those.
Yeah.
I've had a student athlete try and commit suicide. I've had all that sitting at her bedside and at 2:00 in the morning, trying to understand what happened. And so, trying to consult the team whilst they're sitting out there in the lobby in the middle of the night because they wanted to be there for their teammate. People don't hear that. They don't see that. Those are the moments that are like hardest. The other stuff, it's just what we do.
Gene Smith, Ohio State Athletic Director until June 30th, 2024. And then he's just grandpa.
That's it. That's the plan.
Yeah, Gene, thanks so much
Thank you,
for taking
Doug.
time out of your day.
Buddy.
We appreciate it. Thanks to you guys for joining us here on the podcast.